Hi, I'm John Hornick. Welcome to lesson 68 of Chef's Apprentice, Learning to Cook Like a Pro, one small plate at a time. This lesson is roasted duck in a baked apple with savory applesauce. This preparation is the first one in the challenging category, but if you've cooked your way from lesson 1 to lesson 68, this lesson shouldn't be very challenging at all. In this preparation, you will practice the duck breast master recipe and make a savory applesauce. You will also use an apple as the presentation vessel for this dish and saute a different kind of apple to pair with the cooked duck. Together, these components make a visually striking presentation that will surely impress your guests. But the most important technique you will practice here is timing. The challenge of this dish is that you will be cooking the duck and sauteing the julienned Granny Smith apples at the same time while roasting the red apples. Your goal will be to complete all of these components at roughly the same time. If you really feel confident, you can make the savory applesauce at the same time, but the instructions have you making the applesauce first before starting the other three components. Techniques today are peeling, seeding, and julienning, seasoning, bringing to a boil, simmering, reducing, adjusting seasoning, and keeping warm. Making a savory applesauce, roasting apples, sauteing and deglazing, making a glaze, flaming, which is optional, cooking duck breast, and plating. So let's start cooking. Okay, let's talk about the mise en place for lesson 68. You're going to need some red apples, about medium size. These are a little bit larger than I'd like to have, but this is what I could find. These are Honeycrisp. You could really use any type of red apple. If you're doing the full description, it's for 8 people, 8 small plates, 8 medium apples. Then you need to have 1 duck breast, skin on, that has already been scored. And the scoring, how you do the scoring, we learned this in the duck breast master recipe, and you're going to be cooking this duck breast according to the duck breast master recipe, which was lesson 27. You use your slicing knife and you cut through the skin just down to the meat. Don't cut into the meat, just cut the skin every ½ inch just down to the meat. Okay, then we're also going to need to have some clarified butter. And we have a bonus lesson on clarified butter, how to make it, and we've used it in other lessons. You'll need about 4 ounces of melted clarified butter. 4 ounces is 1 stick of butter. Also need to have about 1½ cups of duck stock. It could be chicken stock if you don't have duck stock. But remember, we make our stock from scratch in this course, and there's bonus lessons on how to make duck stock. And you'll need about 1½ cups of it if you make the whole description, but you may not use all of that. You also need to have some kosher salt and a peppermill, and then you'll need to have some fresh thyme. Now I said 1 to 2 sprigs. It really depends upon how many leaves there are on those sprigs. You want a decent amount of thyme leaves, fresh thyme leaves. This one has a lot of leaves, so I'm just going to use the 1 sprig. You'll need to have about 2 tablespoons of salted butter, preferably softened. About 1 teaspoon of soy sauce. We're just going to eyeball that when we get to it. Then you'll need to have 2 Granny Smith apples that have been julienned. Now, I teach julienne cut in the knife skills bonus lesson. We've done it in other lessons as well. But basically a julienne is just cutting it till it's like a matchstick size or a narrow French fry type size. And why do we pick the Granny Smith apples? Because they don't brown very fast. They keep their color longer without browning. If you're worried about browning, you want to cut them earlier and then use them later. Toss them in a little lemon juice or a little lime juice. That'll reduce or slow down the browning, and also cover them with plastic. You'll need to have about 1/4 cup of Calvados, which is apple liqueur, or apple brandy actually. We're going to pour that out of the bottle into a separate container when we're ready to use it. Okay, that is all of our ingredients. We'll break, come back, I'll show you the equipment for lesson 68. Okay, for equipment, we're going to need a cutting board and a chef's knife. We need to have a slicing knife to score the skin on the duck breast and then to slice the duck later. Peeler to peel the apple that we're going to julienne. You need to have some things to scoop out the apples. Now, you can have a melon baller, or I'm going to try this ice cream scoop, see how that works. If that doesn't work very well, we're just going to use spoons. You need to have a brush to brush the butter. You need to have a small saucepan to melt the clarified butter, or to make the clarified butter if you haven't already made it. Then we'll need to have another saucepan to make the applesauce, and a wooden spoon. Then we'll need to have a food processor to process the applesauce, and a strainer and rubber spatula to press the applesauce through the strainer so we get a nice smooth applesauce. Then we'll need to have either a baking pan or a sizzle plate to roast the red apples. Now I'm only doing 2, so I'm going to use a sizzle plate. If you're doing all 8, you're going to need to have a sheet pan. And we're going to butter the sheet pan or the sizzle plate, and to do that I'm going to use a butter wrapper. This is the best thing for buttering some kind of a metal pan, because it has butter residue on it from when the butter was wrapped in it, and it has great kind of a waxy consistency, enables you to smear the butter around onto the pan really well. Okay, then we're going to need to have 2 skillets, one to do the duck breast, and the other one to saute the apples. I'm going to use this little wok to saute the apples, but you could use any kind of a frying pan. And then you'll need some kind of a metal spatula. I'm using a wok spatula. You can use any kind of metal spatula. And then we will need to have a bowl to toss the apples with the duck right before plating. So that's all the equipment. We'll break now, come back, and start cooking. Okay, the first 2 things on our prep list are to preheat the oven to 350 degrees and to bring the duck breast to room temperature. Okay, the first thing on our prep list is to top the apples, scoop out the pulp, and to brush them with butter and season them. Okay, so we're going to take our chef's knife and cut. You can see that I'm probably only about 1/4 to 3/8 inch from the top. Okay, this top that I'm cutting off is going to be a top that we're going to put back on at the end for service. Okay, now what we want to do is core the apple. And to do that, we're just going to cut carefully down in the side. I'm not going to use an apple corer because I'm afraid of cutting through the bottom of the apple. We do not want to cut out the bottom of the apple. So I want to get the core out as much as I can. And if there's any seeds left in the pulp, we'll get those out when we remove the pulp. Okay? Now, I'm going to take the pulp out of this apple as carefully as I can. I want to leave a shell, basically, and I'm going to put this pulp directly into the saucepan that we're going to use to make the applesauce. Okay, there we go. I've hollowed out the apple. I've left a wall that's probably about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch thick in most places, okay? And I have I've gotten the seeds out, I've gotten the core out, and I've put the apple pulp into the saucepan. Now, next thing I want to do is take the apple and we're going to take a little bit of clarified butter. And then we're going to take the brush and we're going to brush that butter around the inside and on the outside. Now next we want to season it lightly on the inside and the outside. Okay, and we want to do this with all 8 of the apples if you're doing 8 small plates for 8 people. Put a little butter on the sizzle plate just so nothing sticks. And we're going to roast this right alongside the apple. All right, now the next step is to cook the applesauce. Now we have the apple pulp here and I'm pouring some stock into the pan. Remember, the goal here is to make applesauce. You know the consistency of applesauce. We're going to add the thyme and we're going to add some salt. This is not a sweet applesauce, this is a savory applesauce. Add a little pepper. Now we're going to bring that to a boil on medium heat and then we're going to simmer it. All right, so our stock is coming to a boil here. We're going to reduce the heat to somewhere between medium and low. And we're going to let this simmer. We don't want it to be boiling. We're going to reduce it so it's just simmering. And I want to cook it until the apples are soft. Now they're going to render some liquid when they start to cook down. So, you know, as we did when we were making a puree, we didn't put in enough liquid to cover them. We just put in enough liquid so that they're the apples are poking up out of the stock. So we're going to let that simmer now until these are soft. Okay, so here's the apples. They're nice and soft. It's thickened up a bit, and we're now going to puree that. We're going to remove the thyme and put this into the food processor. And then we're going to process it until it's smooth. Okay, let's see how it looks. Oh, it looks perfect. Okay, good. Next thing we're going to do is strain this into the through the strainer back into a clean pot. I just rinsed out the pot that we used. Take out the blade. Strainer in place. Use the rubber spatula to get the applesauce out of the food processor bowl so we don't miss any of it. Now we're going to press the applesauce through the strainer as we've done with soups and purees. Okay, now we're going to rinse off the back of the spatula. And then clean off the applesauce from the back of the strainer. There's always a good amount of whatever it is that you're straining on the back of the strainer. Okay, now we want to stir this up a little bit, and then we're going to taste it and adjust the seasoning. It's perfect. It does not need any salt or pepper. So now we're just going to keep this warm until we're ready to plate up. Okay, now the next thing on our prep list is to butter the sizzle plate, or if you're doing all 8, the sheet pan that you're using. I'm using a sizzle plate because I'm only doing one tonight, actually. And remember, we're using the butter wrapper, which you can see that butter wrapper had enough butter to get this sizzle plate nice and coated. Okay, now we're going to season the duck, both sides. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to roast the apples. Now I'm only making one, you may be making as many as 8. We're going to place them cut side down on the baking pan or the sizzle plate and put them into the oven, 350 degrees, and we're going to check them at 20 minutes. All right, now while the apple is roasting, we're going to sear the duck breast. Now first thing we're going to do is turn the heat on to medium, let the pan get hot. Now we're not adding any fat to the pan because we're going to be doing the duck breast skin side down, and plenty of fat will render from that duck skin into the pan. Okay, our pan is hot. We're going to put our duck breast skin side down, and we're going to let that sear, according to the duck breast master recipe, 7 minutes on the skin side. Then we're going to turn it. Now as this skin renders, there will be duck fat accumulating in the pan. If you start to get too much of it, take a spoon, spoon it out. I keep it for some other purpose. Put it into a tin can or a glass jar, not in plastic, because it'll be very hot. We don't want the duck to be deep frying in its own fat, so that's why we're going to ladle out any fat if it starts to build up in there. If it's just a coating on the bottom of the pan, no problem. But if it starts to build up a little bit, starts to get deep in any way, we're going to spoon it out. Okay, so our duck has been searing on one side on the skin side for how long was it? 7 minutes. Now we're going to do 2 minutes on the other side. Okay, it's been 2 minutes. We're going to turn off the heat, and then we're going to take the duck and put it onto the buttered sizzle plate and let this finish in the oven for 6 minutes, 350 degrees. All right, so our red apples are still roasting. Our duck is in the oven, and while those things are in the oven, we're going to saute the julienned Granny Smith apples. So we have butter already in the pan, and we're going to let that get hot. Then we're going to add the apples and saute them. All right, now we're going to add the apples. Now the idea here is that we want them to get sauteed, get hot. We don't want them to get soft though. We want them to maintain their crispiness. We're going to add a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper. And then we're going to saute them in the butter. Okay, our apples have been sauteing for a couple of minutes. We're going to put in just a touch of soy sauce, just to give it a little color and a tiny bit of flavor, okay? And then we're going to add the Calvados. Now we can flame it. I'm going to flame it. You do not have to flame it. You can put it in and let the alcohol evaporate, okay? But if you do flame it, and actually in any case, stand back, be careful. Now we're going to just let that cook a little bit till the alcohol burns off, and you've got a glaze, okay? And it's already happened, or it only took a very short amount of time to get to get the liquid to reduce and to have all of the apples glazed, okay? Now, we want to reduce the heat. I'm just going to turn the heat off and keep it in a warm place. I just heard the timer for our apples. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the timer for the duck. Okay, so the duck has been in the oven for 2 minutes. We're going to let this rest now for about 3 minutes in a warm place. Okay, the timer just went off for our roasted red apple. It is nice and soft, yet still maintaining its shape. Okay, now we're going to keep that in a warm place until we're ready to plate. Okay, so during that time, our duck was resting, and we're now going to julienne the duck. So we're cutting the pieces to be about 1/4 of an inch thick, the same angle as we scored the skin earlier. You can see that the duck is medium. I'd say it's medium, not medium rare, which is perfect. Duck, unlike chicken, can be cooked like beef. You can eat duck rare. You can't eat chicken rare. Well, I don't know anybody who does. You probably could, but I don't know anyone who does. Now, and what we're going to do now is we're going to julienne the duck pieces. Now I don't want to end up with a piece that's just skin on top, so I'm cutting in the middle of the meat. So one of the halves that I'm cutting is just meat, and the other half is meat and skin. All right, we're going to cut each one of these, and then we're going to put them into a bowl. All right, now let's clean up our area a little bit. Wipe off the board. Under other circumstances, I'd try to save that juice that I'm just mopping up now, but we have plenty of juice here. Now the next thing we're going to do is to toss the duck with the Granny Smith apples. So we're going to put those apples into the bowl here and toss them. right, now let's keep that warm. We're almost ready to plate. Okay. Okay, now we're going to take our apple, carefully turn it. You can see it's gotten kind of soft, right? Okay. Now we're going to take our applesauce and we're going to put that applesauce down into the apple. Now remember, if you're making for 8, you're going to have to divide that applesauce among the 8 apples that you've roasted, okay? Good. Now we want to take our apples and duck and fill up the roasted apple, okay? And again, you're going to have to be dividing your sautéed apples and your duck among the number of dishes that you're making. All right. Then we want to top this with the apple top and serve it. So there we go. That's the conclusion of lesson 68, roasted duck in a baked apple with a savory applesauce. You can see photos of the final dish at my Instagram, which is at Chef's Apprentice, Cook Like a Pro. Next up is beef sukiyaki. Very interesting, my take on beef sukiyaki. Please remember to subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching.